is Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, one of the best games of all time.
Okay, let's start it.
We're live.
Alrighty, here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Best Games of All Time podcast, where we have the shortest introduction in all of games podcasting. And I am Aaron. I'm back with my co-host Brandon.
Yo.
And tonight we are talking about Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, which is a recently released spin-off of Breath of the Wild, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, I'd say. And it is a game in the Musou genre. And it's a genre that neither Brandon or I seem to have that much experience with, but we kind of wanted to get things started by just talking about what is this genre of Musou games and what should a good game in the Musou genre look like.
Yeah. I guess on that note, like the one thing I was wondering about Musou style games, since this is it's not my first experience with one, but it's definitely my first one kind of giving it a lot of time. I played Dynasty Warriors back in the day, kind of checked it out along the series, but as I was thinking about this crossover with Zelda and the Hyrule world, I was wondering, like, can a Musou game, can it deliver everything that a greatest game, a best game of all time delivers, right? And part of that is the main part I was looking at was story. Just I guess in terms of whatever narrative, can you actually deliver that? And I don't know. I feel I don't want to say that it's not possible for a game to do that based on a genre, because I think that'd be kind of silly to make that kind of claim. Someone could do it, and I think the fact that when I play this game, there are things I think that could make it better indicates that maybe you could reach greatest game status. But yeah, I don't know, or is it one of those things where you just kind of take it and you say, like, the same way you go and you watch Fast and the Furious, you allow it to be like, that can be a best movie of all time for some because of the expectation when you enter, right?
Yeah, that's interesting because like when I think about this genre, I think it's a genre that a lot of people don't have that much respect for, because of the premise, which is like one guy typically against like several thousand enemies, and it's from a narrative perspective. I think it's really hard to make any real sense, and it's very challenging, and I think this game kind of falters in the sense that it doesn't really address that at all, right? There's sort of a huge disconnect between the way the narrative's flowing, and it's like, yeah, these are presumably real people to some extent, right? Like, you can see Zelda being a real person. The game certainly takes great steps to try to get us to empathize with Zelda and see her as someone whom we can relate to. But when we play the game, we see Zelda using her like magic tablet to make like steel blocks appear out of thin air, and she's like swinging them around with a magic magnet and sending many dozens of enemies flying in all directions, and by herself killing many hundreds of enemies over the course of a single battle. And that's one thing that I think, to go back to what you were saying, it's like that's the premise of these games, right? Is that you're one versus 1,000 or so, or several thousand, and how do you make that even seem plausible or even interesting? That was something that I struggled with when I was playing the game.
Yeah, I think of as I'm sitting here trying to think of what other mediums might have gotten that. Um, I think it's not an unfamiliar stage for some pick your favorite battle sci-fi fantasy movie where it's the last stand, and even Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
right? Like the hordes of the wave of enemies coming over the hill, and against all odds you're kind of conquering them. But I think those are instances where they did succeed in making that believable, or making that at least dispelling that image of like how does this even work, right?
Yeah.
Or the movie 300, the Spartan army, and all that movie was basically this game. This is just war porn.
Right.
And so it's doable, and I understand it's not fair to compare movies to games, but the point being, like, if you just give a little more, I think, on the backstory and the narrative side, I think it could be doable, or at least I think it could be elevated at the very least a little more.
I think it would require Zelda to, and I know this is something Nintendo would never do, is take Zelda a little less seriously than it typically takes it. Because like in 300, there's a really kind of absurd, like comic booky
Mm-hmm.
aspect to the way that movie looks, and the way the protagonists in it look. And it's, I mean, there's a reason why the Leonidas dude uh, in that movie was like heavily memed in the early age of the internet, right? Because it's just so ridiculous. And I doubt that's a step that Nintendo is willing to take. I was thinking of another example came to me, which was this iOS game that I played a lot, over 5 years ago, I think. Uh, and it's called Ziggurat. And the premise is just, it's a very simple in premise game. And you're just like the last living dude alive, the last person alive. And you have a big laser gun, and you're standing on a ziggurat on the top, and these aliens are just coming at you from all directions. And the mechanic of the game is just to kill as many of them as you can before they inevitably kill you. And that's your score, is like how many you killed. So I think it takes kind of an absurd premise to really uh, give the narrative aspect of something like this any legs. I mean, what are other games that people like where you just kill hundreds of enemies? Like Earth Defense Force. I know people like
Yeah.
those games a lot, and I mean, everyone regards the narrative in those games as being kind of a joke, right? So,
Right.
it's something like that. I think that's what it takes, and I'm not sure Nintendo would have ever gone there.
So I'm conflicted on this point if I agree or disagree with you, because I hold Zelda, the Hyrule world, and a lot of the characters in like a high regard, and from nostalgia, from storytelling, all of these things, and so that's where I do agree with you, right? Is that Zelda is revered. I mean, she's the princess, right, of Hyrule, and one of the three elements of the Triforce, or wielders. And so there does, like, there's this clout to her, but then to allow this game to be made, to say like, yeah, throw the Zelda franchise,
Yeah,
like skin it on a Musu game, like right there, I'm like, well, they're clearly willing to degrade her,
yeah,
like, which I would be fine with. But the treatment of the character, the way they actually played it out, it didn't match up with that. Like, here you have this ridiculous setting,
hmm
and she has these ridiculous powers, which I hated. Like, they they could have put those powers on any other character, and I would not have batted an eye. But to do that, like, Zelda, your power is the fucking Sheik tablet from Breath of the Wild. Like, that's
yeah.
that's her power. Like, so that's where I'm like, they're clearly willing to make a joke out of her.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that was one of the things that bugged me about this game is that it didn't fall into either category. They didn't say like we're taking the path of reverence, and they didn't say like this is going to be just absurd to the max. You know, they tried to do both, and it didn't feel good. I didn't appreciate that.
Yeah, when I think about I think the relationship with Breath of the Wild is important as a game that, I mean, if you polled everyone who plays video games right now, it would be on probably a top 5 best games of all time list. It's to me, it seems to have superseded Ocarina of Time and getting the Zelda slot on that list. And I mean, what else would be on there?
In the Zelda franchise, or you just mean in general?
In general, I'm just out of curiosity, I'm thinking like Deus Ex would be on there, just to think of like the caliber of games that people compare it to. Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, or like a Half-Life or Portal.
Half-Life 2, Portal. Yeah. It's reached that level of reverence, and including for my partner, who basically she refused to even see the game. Like when I'm like, I'm going to play this now, and once she realized like what it was about and what the premise was and what the mechanics were, she's like, I don't want to see this. I don't want it to taint my memory of Breath of the Wild.
I support that fully. Like, how dare you do this to the franchise?
Yeah. So I understand that, and I want to, in some sense, avoid putting any game on a pedestal, and saying like, this game's untouchable. But I know a lot of people had that reaction, and for me, one of the things that made Breath of the Wild special, to go back to what you were talking about, these are characters that need to be treated with respect, is it took really big strides in terms of introducing some actual narrative interest for the series. And I thought that was a first for Zelda, and I think that's one of the reasons why people regard it so highly. But I think almost for the first time, Zelda characters were characters that we could empathize with and appreciate as acting like human beings and not just being, pieces in a heroic play about saving the princess or something like that. It's like the premise is inherently dumb. You're an elf boy who comes out of the forest to go to the castle and save the princess. It's a pretty boring premise on its own, but it's possible to take something like a premise like that and make it interesting, right? Like I think about the Christopher Nolan Batman films. I think a lot of people appreciated, myself included, how he went very deep on the lore of the Batman character and of the Batman world. And again, it's a stupid premise. It's like mega rich guy jets around the city dressed like a bat fighting crime. But he made that an interesting character through some real narrative hard work, I thought. And it did a lot for that series of films. And Breath of the Wild, I think, did the same thing, right? It's like Zelda was a character that we could empathize with for the first time because she has all these expectations on her about unlocking her powers. And I think we talked about in the Ocarina of Time episode, there's the romance that never went anywhere with Mipha, the Zora champion, and how that was just so interesting that it went nowhere. It's like the game showed you enough for you to know that Mipha's interested in Link, but it goes nowhere, just like as often happens in real life. So, I for me at least, that's why I hold the game in high regard. And to see the characters in this type of setting felt like they weren't, they're undoing a lot of the work that they did in Breath of the Wild of making these characters seem like real characters.
Yeah, I think they, they're aware it's a business and they're aware that they have this franchise. And I think there's also an awareness of the type of expansion of world building and lore that has happened, and pivotally with Ocarina of Time, right? That's kind of like a core root of the many branchings of other Zeldas, and kind of how, you know, events in time usually are linked to have happened before or after Ocarina of Time, and maybe Breath of the Wild is a reset on that. Like what they're doing with Age of Calamity, it's 100 years before or something like that. So they're aware that like we can branch away and kind of expand on this franchise like other companies successfully do. Like this is not a new concept. And I do applaud that they're willing. How many times have you played games over the past decades and wished like for that franchise to branch out into other territories? Like, you hear like the Pokemon community is like, give me a MMO like Pokemon or whatever it is, right? Like people want the expansion of these games. But it's just, I think it just has to be done with care. And I think, I was thinking about where this has happened successfully, and I think about Disney. And specifically, like I'll focus on like the animated Disney and Pixar and that part of it, not the later Marvel and Star Wars Disney, which Marvel they've done pretty well, but with the animated Disney stuff, they have core rules for how these characters live, and you can't violate those rules. And that even extends into the theme parks. There are rules, where an actor coming out dressed as whoever, while they have multiple around the park, they have it locked down so they know like no one is out, can be seen. It's all about suspending that disbelief and keeping that dream real, and this pervades even the stupid shitty $2.99 books that they put out with the fucking holographic cover that looks stupid as shit. Like even those have someone at Disney like signing off and saying like, no, you cannot put Princess whoever in a pink dress. Like that's just not, and to have these like rule sets that you can't violate, and the end result of that draconian tactic is a franchise that just lives on for decades. And I worry I don't want to see that happen to the Zelda series. Like that's kind of the same way you're saying that your partner like doesn't even want to see it. Like I totally get that, because I don't want to be complicit in the destruction of something that was like and this is here's my my bias coming out right here. I believe that Zelda could go on to be like a myth of time, like a human, the story, like in the same way that the myths of old have just pervaded across time.
Just another story.
Right? Yeah. But it's another world that can continue on. Or I guess a better example, I shouldn't go all the way back to Greek mythology, but like Lord of the Rings, it's 100 years and it's still beloved. And so, don't tread on me, bro. Be cool.
Yeah. Zelda. I think we talked about on the previous, when we sort of did like a pre-call to talk about the game, and how Zelda is like she's reduced to a voiceover on occasions, where when you do one of the dumb side missions in the game, which I hate.
Don't call it a side mission.
It's just the game is filled with trash. There's just trash all over the world map, and you get those like, it's like there's the thinnest veneer of story over these little stupid things. It's like, oh, the Azora boy is not doing his swimming training, and he needs 10 like stamina basses and like 3 mighty bananas, and then he'll do his training. And so then you push, it's like, I'll give him the fucking bananas. I don't care. I didn't even know I had them. And
I have 600 of them.
Sure. Right. Yeah, sure. Take them. And then you do it. And then you give it, for some reason, gives Zelda like a bonus heart or something like that. Like she gets an extra heart container, and then she has a voiceover come in, and it's like superb. It's like, oh, okay, I guess this isn't a real character. Sorry, I was
Yeah.
confused about that for a second.
Uh,
So I hated that, and I mean, yeah, I could see why my partner, and I mean, I enjoyed playing the game to some extent, but I could see why people
yeah.
wouldn't want anything to do with it for that reason.
Yeah, and just to be contrarian on what you're saying, but then agree with what you just said. I did enjoy playing it at points, and there were things that it showed me that I thought I do want more of this
Mhm.
in the Zelda world, right? Where the one that sticks out for me is the Zora Kingdom, and you're talking to, I don't remember the Emperor's name, and it's like a giant. I mean, it's just a giant fish creature, right?
Yeah.
But every time you've interacted with him in the Zelda world, like most characters, they're these silent characters. And we talked about this too, how I think there is a good use for a text only, for reading
Yeah.
in a game. And I think that's great. It's done well in games like Breath of the Wild. But in games like this, with Age of Calamity, the animation and the voice, the voice acting, it gave it that Saturday morning cartoon feel in a way that felt good, where I was like, this is cool. Like, I'm in the world with these people and we're talking and there's a battle, and they're working it out. And it breathed a life into the kind of what's normally a still life painting. It made it a cartoon, and I thought, yeah, like I would be okay with this.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't make the characters so like what's the word? Just cheap, like
It feels cheap.
it
Yeah.
feels cheap. Like
Yeah.
yeah, and what you're talking about too with the stupid, they're not side quests, but this game wants you to think they are. That's stuff like that is where the skinning, where they just reskinned their engine with Zelda assets. That's where it really just is raw and exposed, and you're like, wow, like it is the thinnest veil, totally, of any sense of a mechanic. I don't know that it goes too far right into that. And I think the point with these games, from what I gather from that experience, is I'm not supposed to think about that or care about that. So I've already put way too much thought, for into that. But
Yeah.
that is an area where I'm like, you could make a better game. Like, here's a spot. Here's where you could improve. Like, you could elevate this.
Yeah, for me, it was always a really bad feeling to come back, like to finish a mission, like a 30-minute long mission. And then it's like, oh man, I must be getting like kind of close to the end. And then the map just lights up with like literally like 15 new side missions. And you're like, are you kidding me? So it's just padding out the game with just meaningless stuff. And there were plenty of other ways to handle that sort of progression of it, because typically those are for getting characters like longer combos or more health or something like that. And there are plenty of other ways to do that. And I'm just like, who wants this? Who wants to like press A to give the bananas to the boy and get an extra bonus heart for Zelda or Mifa or whoever it is?
Yeah.
It's just, it feels so cheap. Yeah.
There's a psychology to a lot of game development these days, right? On the reward and even the micro reward system, and you for sure see this in mobile games. But you see it in AAA games. You see this in games in general now, right? Where it's the loot packs, it's all this stuff to just get those tiny hits of dopamine. Doesn't matter how big they are. This didn't do that. Like those were elements in which you could do that, and it didn't even do that. The fact that it was just like it got in the way. It's like, I need to mash A as fast as I can. Yeah.
Just filled with trash.
Yeah.
It really is.
It really is. It's just like, it's just a little fucking Yeah, landfill. It's like, oh, here's the here's the map of Hyrule. We turned it into a landfill.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. I think we should talk about the game does some good things.
Oh,
For
for
me,
sure.
it did. And like
No,
we were
yeah.
saying, it's like, yeah, I want to play it sometimes. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, I wouldn't mind playing that right now. You know, um, like it looks really good. I
Yeah.
think it has more to do with the Breath of the Wild sort of aesthetic,
Hmm.
and Breath of the Wild having been a game specifically designed for the Switch hardware and taking its, kind of limitations as being by far the weakest console among competitors, like taking that into account and designing an aesthetic that makes sense for that system, and it just looks great. So that probably has a lot to do with Breath of the Wild, but I really liked how every character feels different, and they
Hmm.
clearly put in tons of work into making each character completely their own thing. I didn't play all the way to the end, but I did unlock all the champions or recruited them or whatever,
Hmm.
and also the like maracas dude who I chose not to play as
I didn't get
for
him.
for
Yeah.
reasons, but 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 it's really neat how much clearly like painstaking work was put into them, and each character has this cool little mechanic,
Hmm.
right, that governs how you play, and it completely changes how you play, right? It's like as
Yeah.
Mifa, you're always trying to activate the symbols and build up the copies of yourself. As Daruk, you're always trying to make those magma tower things that you can blow up
Hmm.
and hit enemies. Each character has their own little thing like that that makes each of them fun to try out, and it's just cool to play as Impa, right? It's cool
Yeah.
to play as Mifa, and those are the two characters in addition to Link uh, that I selected the most. So, yeah, it's just clearly a lot of work went into it. The animations are all fluid and beautiful.
Hmm.
Um, it's it's a it's a neat game in that sense.
It is, and I think like you said, uh, I don't never want to play it. It's something where it's like, yeah, I could drop into that, and I think that is that spot that Netflix shows hit, or the
Yeah.
Fast and the Furious, or like the popcorn movies. Like, it's not that I need to have everything be tight and highbrow every time.
Mhm.
It's like I enjoy 300, right? You know what I mean? Like, because I walk in expecting. So with this game, yeah, I was like, yeah, this is fun. I could jump in and I'll do a battle and unlock some stuff, like whatever. Um, but yeah, it did, minus the part where I just hated what they gave to Zelda, the diversity of abilities and yeah, the style of gameplay diversity that also caused was enjoyable. And even just jumping around, right, from you're in a battlefield and sending the characters to different waypoints, and then just toggling, you can toggle between them, and just the like rapid change of battle like style you had to engage with was
Mhm.
it
Yeah,
was it was very pronounced, yeah, in a satisfying way.
it actually works. Like it seems like it would be hard to make that work to me. Like I've
Mm.
never made a game, but it it just seems like it would be hard to quickly, like immediately more or less jump between different characters who are all over different parts of the battlefield and be able to send one character running to one direction, and at any point that you switch to them, they're on the path that you
Hmm.
told them to run on. The battlefields are these huge open areas that never load, and
Hmm.
again, maybe that has something to do with the engine of Breath of the Wild, um, or the assets or something being easy to do things like that with. I don't know, but it just
Yeah.
works, and it feels like that would be hard to do, and so I certainly respected it from that perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure there are people who are very skilled at this and have put so many hours into it. They know how to break the game, or how to abuse, one ability to kind of cheese it. But barring that extreme, I feel like it plays very well where there isn't one clear like character and tactic to use that just steamrolls, ahead above the rest. Like it remains fun to have, kind of like you said, like your top three that you enjoy toggling between or bringing with you, just the way their gameplay works out. Yeah, so I think that's clearly this studio that is reskinning other series is skilled is skilled at that part of what they're doing, right? So it's not like I said, as much as I hate that reskinning aspect, there's still a lot of skill in going into the game that they're making.
Yeah, they certainly have a process, and it's clearly streamlined, and they know how to just sort of drop stuff in and make it work. So that was cool. I think it's worth talking about this sort of genre of action games, Muso games. It's, again, I've never played one of these before. I know that Dynasty Warriors has, in my mind, kind of a bad reputation as being a sort of a series for, it's like maybe there's not a lot of challenge, or it's a series that goes out of its way to be constantly patting you on the back and telling you how good you are, when all you do is press X and slay like 100 dudes in one swing of your sword or whatever. And I want to cover that in a little bit more depth later. But just as an action game, it's got this weird thing going on where you will often press a button and your guy or gal that you're controlling will do like 6 things. It's like Link has this one attack where you can press X at some point in a combo. You can press X one time, and he will like flip the enemy into the air with his big sword, and then jump up and do like 10 somersaults, hitting the enemy with each somersault, and then like knock them down to the ground, and then like grand slam them into the stratosphere. It's like, or if you happen to be like in front of 10 enemies, it will do that to 10 enemies at the same time. And it's just it's weird to make an action game like this, I feel like, because I feel like action games are all about the immediate, like, moment to moment interplay between you and the enemies. And it's really the polar opposite of Hades, which we covered previously. And I almost feel like, in light of this game, that we did not do Hades enough justice. Because it really is, it's so good. Yeah. It is rock solid. It's a hardcore, really cool, tough action game. And then this game, you pressing X one time and flinging people in all directions, And in Hades, it's always your fault when you die, and when you succeed, all credit is due to you.
Yeah.
Right?
I feel like I hear what you're saying about, looking back on Hades, and I stand by everything that we said there, because the thesis is like, is this game eternal? And I won't go into it here, but like the things that we pointed out with Hades, they're definitely nitpicks. But they're things that just get in the way that I'm like, yeah, I'm still cool with being an asshole to Hades.
You're right.
But
you're right about that. There's definitely stuff to complain about in Hades,
totally,
and it's like,
get your point. Like I know what you're trying to illuminate by saying that. Like, right, is like you compared these two games, and it's like if that's how we were grading it, then Hades would be a best game of all time, hands down. Like, total agree. Yeah. Because the like comparing the two, like the sense of control, the tightness of control is not present in this game like it is in Hades or many games. And it's again, I think this is where that conflict comes out, is like, you're trying to make me a badass, my character, whoever that is, but then in a way you take control away from me, where you're doing these wild flourishes. It doesn't allow me to be the one being the badass. It's an animation playing, and it's like, and also for me, that just I don't like losing a sense of control, where I'm like, wait, how did I just do that, or did that happen automatically? Like, what? That doesn't make me feel like a badass. Like, I'll watch a movie if I just want to see choreography.
Mm.
But I'm playing a game because I want to be the choreographer, right? So give me the ability or the potential to, and I'll grind the hours away getting used to the controls to be the badass.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Hades did allow, and this one didn't even come close to.
Yeah, it's really good. And I think about like just at a really basic level, like the normal attack versus the strong attack in Hades.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fiercely tactical in that game, right? It's like you if you do the strong attack at the wrong time, you will absolutely be punished every single time. And so it's a real you really have to be on your toes, and it's like, do I have enough time to get this attack off? You're making all those decisions in real time. And in this game, I actually like never found any tactical benefit to considering the normal attack versus a strong attack. It's like what flavor of ice cream do you want to eat? It's like it's truly inconsequential, and it's just, or how do you want to look cool doing this? Do you want to look cool this way, or do you want to look cool that way?
Right.
And stuff like that, I feel like it indicates a certain, it's like the developers are trying to create some feeling in the player that I don't think is very good. It's like, I don't know who this is for, but it is the game takes this like very fawning tone toward you at all times. It's constantly like telling you what a good job you're doing, in addition to the fact that you're one person killing hundreds of enemies in a matter of minutes. It's, as one person you can kill 1,000 enemies in a single battle, and there's sort of unintentionally hilarious, I think, moments that arise when the game is tripping over itself to tell you how cool you are and how good you are. Like in the tutorial level, when you kill 600 enemies in the first level, and then the king, there's like a little blurb from the king at the bottom, and he's like, that young knight has performed quite well. A promotion may be in order. It's like, I just killed 600 enemies.
Yeah. Send your soldiers home. Like, I don't need a promotion. I am the one. Like, yeah.
No one else here matters.
Spirit. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that kind of thing. I just think there's an interesting observation to be made around, it's like games like Hades that if you learn to play them well, you are literally cool. Right? Versus games that just tell you you're cool. Right. Hades makes you become cool, and it never really tells you that you are. You just know you're cool because you've seen what you've done.
Right.
And it's the polar opposite of this game, where it makes me think of what we talked about in the Ocarina of Time episode, where Eiji Aonuma, who's like the head of the Zelda franchise, he said before that Zelda puzzles are designed to make the player feel smart. And that's the goal of them. And then we talked about in that episode puzzles that actually require you to be smart. And I think it's the same kind of dichotomy here. It's like a very good action game lets you know you're cool because you just see what you're doing. And whereas this game is just constantly trying to tell you how cool you are, how cool your friends are. Right? It's like Princess Zelda, she's listed in the game's index. She's not just like the holy princess. God. Yeah, she's not just like the holy. Yeah, she's she's a burgeoning scholar too, by the way.
Yeah.
It's just like so lame.
It is.
And as someone who, it's like, I feel comfortable at a restaurant if I'm asking for a refill at a restaurant. It makes me uncomfortable to do that. So to have someone on my case constantly being like, dude, you rock, you're awesome, it just feels horrible to me. Yeah. So it makes me wonder, like, who are these games for? Who wants this?
I think, and I think that goes like immediately back to the broken sense of reward that this game clearly does not know how to dole out. Right? It's like here's the overworld map of all the bullshit side quests for you to get a thumbs up from. Here, like, just for playing this level, we're going to tell you that you're God's gift to the earth. Like, it's like too much, right? And it's like their metering is broken on how to dole this out. And again, the only thing I can think of, you're saying, who is this for? And the only thing that I can think of is it's for people who aren't paying attention to that, right? I wonder, and I'm being an asshole now, but like I wonder, is someone sitting here playing that being like, God, that felt good, like.
Oh yeah, who is this person? You know who it is. This is who it is. Did you see that video of that guy? I might have sent it to you. It's this guy like playing an Ocarina of Time. He learned to play an ocarina, and he's playing an Ocarina of Time medley.
No!
And he's like dressed up as Link, and it's another person who's dressed as Zelda, and they flew like on location to these ancient castles in Europe somewhere, clearly, and they're like doing all these scenes where he's like running to her across a field, and he's like sitting on a log in a forest playing his ocarina. Literally, like a real person made this. That's who it's for. But that shit is popular, and so so it's like, even like, I know you care deeply about the Zelda franchise, just based on some of the stuff you've said, and I like it too a lot. But it gets to a point where it's like, this is just too much. This makes you feel weird, and so I was made to feel very uncomfortable by the game.
Yeah, no, all I can think is just that it's that it's uncomfortable when a reward doesn't meet the action, and this game just keeps doing that to you. Yeah, where you're just amazing. Like,
you're the best.
You're the best. And like, I think another litmus for this is like, at least in the gaming community, because that's, and I feel safe limiting it to that. This is not a gatekeeping thing, but like in the gaming community, I wouldn't expect there would be a lot of video captures of this, right? Like, if you go search whatever games on Twitch or looking for clips of, Shroud's best plays or whatever, even if you don't play the games, I feel like you'd be able to watch a clip and be like, wow, that's kind of badass. Like, I see where he outsmarted these other people, or I see, I can see the Titanfall clip where someone has spent 400 hours perfecting the movement in this game, and it looks like a movie. It's so scripted, right? I just don't see, like, who's going to be playing this and think like, ooh, I'm gonna record the last 2 minutes because that what I just did was fucking awesome, right? Like,
oh yeah,
like, dude, I could record 2 minutes, any 2 minutes of my gameplay, and put it next to theirs, and then put it out there. Like, can anyone tell the difference?
Yeah,
like, what?
That's such a good point. That's such a good point, because it's like, because here are the Zelda videos that get pickup that are like that. It's people doing insane shit in Breath of the Wild that the game was never designed. Like, did you see the clips of like someone doing the, like, flipping the Guardian up in the air, and it's like they do a Cryonis like ice thing under the Guardian, and it flips them super high into the air, and then they, like, I don't know what the term would be, but basically like no scope a bomb arrow just into the sky, and like it hits the enemy as the Guardian as it's falling down and explodes. It's so cool, and it's like almost impossible to do that. And
no, I haven't seen that one, but I have there. I mean, yes, this is like, it's just been flooding since the game had come out, right? Of people finding these crazy, like the little temples, people finding ways to beat them by, same thing, right? You use 3 of the abilities and throw Link all the way across the map, and then he lands like in the perfect spot, and it's like, that's exactly the point, right? Is that those people clearly understand to the frame, like exactly how this game is working and how to manipulate it. And they are badasses at manipulating that engine. I don't see anything remotely close to that with a game like this. And so that's again, that's not to limit it to like, oh, if you're not a hardcore gamer, like then this game is garbage. It's just that it's just super high level, surface level interaction.
Maybe, yeah, maybe there are clips of people killing. I mean, my limit was like, I think I got close to 1,000 or something KOs on one battle. Maybe people are getting
Yeah.
5,000 or something. I don't know.
Right.
Probably, but maybe we're wrong. But I think you're totally right that just the moment to moment gameplay doesn't lend itself to that type of um, pursuit of excellence, right? Because what you're already doing is so absurd. It's like you can't push the ceiling really
Yeah.
any higher. It seems like.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, I'll have to after this. I'm gonna go look and see if I can find. I'll send it to you if I find like just a real badass.
Yeah.
But you probably won't get a link.
Yeah, I think not. It like we were talking about who is this game for? It's not for me. I think I've decided. And I just think there needs to be some consideration of what passes for story and narrative in games. And it's interesting to think that, Miyamoto says, for example, that games aren't a storytelling medium. And he's very convinced of that. And I just think that's completely wrong. As I think like Doki Doki Literature Club shows, as other games that are just purely narrative experiences like Gone Home goes. There's no mechanics in that game. It's just walking around an empty house. But right now, it is unquestionable that the standard for storytelling in games is far below film, and it is far below written fiction. And it's just what is accepted as a quote unquote game story would not pass in those mediums. And there's some, like, we're playing around my house, we're playing a lot of Mr. Driller Drill Land on the Switch right now. And it's, of course, Mr. Driller Drill Land doesn't need a quote unquote story, right? Even though it does have one, and it kind of gets in the way. But it's other mediums of fiction would not accept these characters. They would not. It would not accept Daruk, who's basically just there to be like, "You're doing a great job. You're my go-to guy," and Urbosa is just there to tell Zelda that Zelda is her little bird, and she's going to be very protective of Zelda. And then Urbosa is going to go kill hundreds of enemies, and that's what they're there for. And I just think these characters, at least in this game, they are there to satisfy a kind of very base level emotion or power fantasy in the player. And in this game, at least. And in Breath of the Wild, I think, like we were saying, that game took some very positive steps toward injecting some humanity into Zelda characters, I think for the first time. And then this game comes out and just kind of undoes some of that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what does that tell us? It's like, for whom is this game made? Like, or for who is it made, or for whom? I think it's whom. It's the guy who is making that, like, Ocarina video.
Poor guy.
Yeah, because they know he'll buy it. And it's like, it says something about how Zelda is basically an asset for Nintendo, despite our feelings about it. And it's an asset to be exploited. And because they're a company run by shareholders, and they have an executive steering committee or something like that. And they're there to make money. And so we shouldn't maybe expect too much of it because of that.
I think that's right, and I think it is a kind of a wake up call, and it is why I wince at it when it does happen, when this game comes out, when I'm playing it. Is I think probably my expectations for what it can be and the reverence in which I hold it is overinflated. That's what this game tells me, right? So whether or not that's true, doing this to a series does give me that kind of reality check of like, all right, calm your shit, bro. Like, it's just it's a made up character that we're gonna make some money off of. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, okay, cool.
I get it.
Yeah, I can accept that. I don't want to, but sure. All right, fuck you.
Yeah, it does feel a little like a fuck you.
Yeah.
I mean, and honestly, it's like AAA like this just isn't where the action is at in terms of narrative and storytelling in games. And the games that are made by 5 people are where the action is actually at for that.
That's a fair point, I think. Yes, especially right now. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at on it. Is I just had a kind of disappointing experience. And I feel like this happens to me once every 1 to 2 years. It's like because I stopped playing for a moment, like the old PlayStation RPGs that I typically play, or the like mechanics focused kind of indie roguelike type games that I typically play, and I play something big in AAA, and it happens every time. I'm like, okay, this is where we're at. Still got it. Okay.
Right. Yeah. I'll come back in 10 years and see what you're doing. Yeah. Or 5 years, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We actually are kind of at the point now, as this game shows, where the really basic level stuff in terms of trying to make games like movies, which I think is a foolish pursuit. But many AAA games kind of aim for that, where just the basic stuff like mouth movements and the way characters' eyes look aren't so horrendously distracting as to cause you to just completely suspend or to
disbelief.
What's the phrase? Yeah, it's like you immediately just don't believe in it. So we're there technology wise. I feel like, especially if the developers are comfortable with some kind of fantasy in the aesthetic. I think realistic graphics still don't work for me. It's like
they can't get out of they're still, if you go hyper realistic, you're just hanging out in the uncanny valley just permanently. We have a ways to go, but I think people have learned largely you stylize it and immediately your brain is forgiving. And it's like, oh yeah, this is totally like, this looks amazing. Like these characters look like real life. When it's Breath of the Wild, it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're almost there, or we can be there already, but there's, so I guess the style aspect is there, but the substance aspect I feel like just hasn't really caught up yet.
Yeah.
But the mech sections of this game are fucking awesome.
Oh, dude, totally.
They're so awesome.
We can't not talk about that. I was gonna forget.
It indicates the how the extent to which they went to make, it's like a whole mode. It's like a whole different engine unto itself, surely, right? And it's just very fun and cool.
Absolutely.
And I would play a whole game like that.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
so this is where it goes back to exactly where I was like tapping into the fuck yeah, this is cool. Like, oh, you're doing cutscenes with voice acting, and it brought me back to the magic of Power Rangers, which I am not ashamed to say, like I rocked back in the day. Even back then, I was aware that I was too old for Power Rangers. Like only by a couple of years, but like I didn't tell my peers about it. But what they delivered on was that like it was campy as fuck, like, and I was aware of it then. But what it was giving you was like badasses, alien battles, and then their Zords, their mechs that they fought with, which very clearly is a thing. Another thing that people are into, right? You look at across anime and games and movies. And it's like this game had these elements where I was just like, go with that, right? Like follow the mech mechanic and follow this cartoony, it's something. I feel like they approach a territory. It was like you could be on Adult Swim, right? Where it's like it's not actually Saturday morning cartoon. I'm not putting it in the category with Cowboy Bebop, but I'm just saying like, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, it's off on a tangent, but the mech part, it kind of blew me away. Like I'm playing this game and I'm like, yeah, push X to be a badass. And then you go to this mech part. I'm like, what is this? Like, this
just
is fucking
comes
cool.
out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's just it's very lightly tutorialized. It never is like you don't have like a practice level or something like that to figure out how to do it. It just throws you in and you go, and there's enough challenge. I feel like where I was like down to 1 or 2 hearts on almost every one of the mech levels, and so in that sense, I felt like the difficulty was perfectly tuned, where it's like you would want to play one of those levels 1 or 2, maybe max 3 times before the illusion starts to sort of fade, right? And it just was such a good, cool section of the game that I really loved. And so very awesome mech section of the game where you pilot the Divine Beast. Very shitty like implementation of the Breath of the Wild world.
Yeah.
Kind of a shitty action game, honestly, like because you're just hammering buttons. I mean, you're literally hammering buttons to send dudes flying, and you do not give a fuck about what button you're pressing when. And you can stand there, and I find this instructive to do with the action games. It's like just go up to an enemy and just stand there and see how long it takes them to hit you. And in this game, on multiple occasions, it was more than 5 seconds for them to take a swing at you. So, yeah, it's kind of a shitty action game, and it doesn't really seem to. To me, it harms Zelda as kind of like a property, right? That people care about. But very cool mech sections.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line.
I can't add anything to that. Yeah, that feels right.
Right on. Okay. I think we're done here.
I think that's lay it to rest. Yeah.
Thanks everyone for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, we would certainly appreciate it if you would take the time to leave us a review on whatever app you're using to listen to podcasts. And just as a little teaser, we plan to cover at some point, it probably will be the next episode, but maybe a few episodes down the line, we plan to cover Final Fantasy VIII, which I love so much. And so we're going to get to that point where we can do an episode on it, we hope. And if that interests you, please hit the subscribe button if you wouldn't mind. And also you can email us at bestgamespod@gmail.com. And we also have a website that you can check out with some show notes at bestgamesofalltimepodcast.com. All right, thanks a lot for listening.
Thanks, y'all.